Steve Baker has been on the program a few times, and he is an investigative reporter that have been doing some work, and it's now exposed on theblaze.com. He has been working on the January 6th puzzle for a while now, and his efforts have been frustrated over and over again by the politics in Washington when he's just trying to find the truth. The story that has just been released this morning, did Pelosi's security chief perjure himself in the Oath Keepers trial, has wide consequences. Welcome, Steve. How are you?
Glenn, I am living proof that a man can live on coffee alone.
You started this a year ago today.
It was 1 year ago yesterday. October 3rd, during the Oath Keepers trial, was the first scent that there was something wrong. Something happened in the trial first thing that morning when the lead prosecuting attorney, Jeffrey Nessler, assistant U.S. attorney, approached the lectern and the bench and said to Judge Almeida, "We have a problem." He said, "We have a rogue attorney that is about to release some FBI 302s. These are interviews of one of the characters in this story that we released this morning. And that if he does that, these are sealed documents that are not publicly available, and we can't have that." And Judge Almeida did something that I had never seen before, and I don't know that any of the media in the media room where I was sitting had ever seen this before. He actually directed the media pool to put out a tweet and threaten this particular attorney and let him know that if he released those sealed documents, he would have him held in contempt of court. And right then I went, what are in those documents?
So what was in those documents?
They're still sealed, but I will tell you that the documents themselves were the actual FBI interviews of one of these Capitol Police officers. And the primary problem that the government has with those documents is that the testimony was changed. His testimony about his interaction with the Oath Keepers, which in the first testimony he revealed to be a positive interaction, that the Oath Keepers lined up between him and the more agitated protesters and assisted him in keeping them off of him and helping him de-escalate. That was in May of 21, that interview. In August of 21, this officer was brought back in, and the testimony was changed into an aggravated, contentious event with the Oath Keepers, and as well as the creation of a second event to explain the first FBI interview that never happened.
So it is amazing to me, reading your story. It is so well laid out. However, what makes this different, it's not he said, she said, or he said, he said. No. Because you had permission to go into the 14,000 hours of videotape. You knew what you were looking for.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in the story, you knew what time it even happened because the testimony was gunshots, gunfire. Right. And so that marked it at a certain time when they shot an innocent. So tell me about what you found, what the story was in the testimony, and then what you found on the tape.
Well, the story in the testimony from Special Agent, now this is Capitol Police Special Agent David Lazarus, is that when he heard the gunshots at 2:43, 2:44, broadcasted over the radio that shots had been fired, that he was down in the tunnels escorting senators towards the Rayburn building to the other Senate office buildings. And that's quite a long distance away from the House chamber where allegedly these shots were fired. He said at that moment at 2:44, he began turning around and heading back. Well, because we knew what to look for, we immediately went there and we started working our way backwards, and we found him in the tunnels at that time. The problem with it is that when he emerged from the Senate building tunnels in the subway system below the Capitol, and by the way, Glenn, these are videos that were never released to the defense attorneys in this trial.
This, if we were living in normal times, the people that had been convicted with any of the testimony revolving around these guys, they would be released. Any other time in American history, they would be released because this is perjury. And somebody set this up. Somebody.
And we're working on that trail as well.
Good.
But going back to Lazarus, so he emerges and comes back into camera frame on the Capitol TVs with absolute proof of the exact time down to the second of when he emerged back into camera. He even passes under an analog clock in the subway at exactly this moment, and it's at 2:48 p.m. when he finally reaches the other side of the tunnels from the Senate office buildings. And when that happens, the Oath Keeper Officer Dunn encounter is almost already over by then. He's nowhere near it, and he still has a long way to go. And then we were able to triangulate because, you know, he'll go out of camera frame for a while, then he'll enter camera frame again from another camera.
Right.
And then he's down another hall, and then he enters another hallway, and then he shows up on the Senate side. And then by the time he reaches the bottom of the stairs that lead up to the rotunda, and it's in a little area that variously called the mini rotunda or the speaker's lobby. When he reaches the bottom of those stairs, it's now 2:45 p.m. and the Oath Keepers are long gone.
Okay, so now let me give you the exact verbiage from the testimony in the court case. Lazarus, the guy you've just been talking about, explained that one rioter asked, "Who are you? Who are you?" Then, according to the trial transcript, he testified. And, you know, one attempted to, I mean, I had my lanyard on with my ID on it. And one, they were videotaping, and one attempted to pull at my ID, and I was kind of like grabbed it back and looked to make sure it was still there. And then I saw an opening. So there was just kind of like, I walked fast to get into the office and check on the staff again. He then detailed description of what took place, what Lazarus described as a very antagonistic in 3 or 4 times that he passed by these Oath Keepers. Every time I interacted or came by, yes, it was very antagonistic. He said this under oath. When he was then shown in court a video clip of 4 Oath Keepers standing in front of Dunn, Lazarus was asked, "Are these the individuals you observed?" Yes. Yes. At any point in these 3 or 4 interactions in this space, did you observe any sort of anything but antagonistic conversation? No, that's correct. Here's the problem. They were already out of the building. At the time we know him now on camera, we have the videotape. The Oath Keepers have been gone for almost 10 minutes.
It was not quite 10 minutes. It was, but when you're in the Capitol video room viewing this, we can put multiple cameras up on the screen at the same time, and then we hit one button and it syncs all of those cameras to the exact timeline. So we're able to watch Lazarus moving through the building in one quadrant of the screen, and then we can watch when the Oath Keepers leave. So as the Oath Keepers leave and they're walking back out through the rotunda, about to exit through the Columbus doors on the east side, it wasn't until that moment that finally Lazarus reaches that area where, in great detail in the trial, and we have the trial transcripts, obviously, in great detail, he describes what he saw, and it just did not happen.
So, this was an important part of the trial, right?
It was a huge part of the trial because the one thing that the government was absolutely intent upon doing was not allowing anything that could be exculpatory or anything that painted the Oath Keepers in a positive light. And this wasn't the only positive interaction that Oath Keepers had with law enforcement that day. Right. You've interviewed Lieutenant Tarek Johnson.
Yes.
Lieutenant Tarek Johnson used 2 Oath Keepers, literally recruited them to help rescue another 16 officers out of a dangerous situation.
Right.
That was never allowed in the trial.
So, and I learned something from the article. Let me see if I can find it here. I had no idea. Oath Keepers, seditious, blah, blah, blah. Federal prosecutors claimed while they were inside the Capitol, members of the group were involved in contentious interaction. I don't know where it is now, but you talk about the Oath Keepers, how they've never had here. 35,000 dues-paying members had more than a decade's worth of spotless record providing disaster relief and security during riots and other large events. They had never once been accused or charged with a crime in thousands of operations. I had no idea.
One of the things that the government could not do in that trial is they could not counter that little piece of information. And of course, it didn't matter in front of a D.C. jury. I mean, the D.C. jury, it was a fait accompli before day one in terms of what the outcome of that trial was going to be. But one of the things that the defense did successfully present is the fact that in years and years of disaster relief operations, security details, and all kinds of other times when they actually went and were recruited and hired by minority businesses like in Ferguson, like in Louisville, Kentucky, and those riots, where they were recruited by minority businesses to come help us protect our businesses. The defense was rather able to show some of those videos, but the one thing that the government could not prove was that at any time since 2009, when the Oath Keepers were founded, that there had ever been a single time where an Oath Keeper had committed violence in any of those operations or had ever committed a crime or any charges had ever been filed.
And when you think the Oath Keepers, you think, oh, they're just really bad. Isn't that remarkable how that has been portrayed and carried by the press? Okay, so there's obviously some sort of conspiracy here because these guys, they're both saying the same story, but it seems to switch where one is saying, no, I saw him at the top of the stairs, and the other guy's saying, no, I saw him at the top of the stairs. They couldn't even get their story right.
Yeah, it's inexplicable that the editor of Harry Dunn's forthcoming book did not check the trial transcripts, because when David Lazarus, special agent, Nancy Pelosi's head of security, tells his version of events, he says that when he runs to the top of the stairs, that he sees this large imposing figure, because Dunn is 6'7", 300 pounds, plus all the gear he had on. And he sees this large imposing figure in a contentious moment with these Oath Keepers that were giving him the business, all right? And that's his testimony. In Dunn's book, he explains that when he ran to the top of that stairs and reached that stairwell landing at the top, that Lazarus was already there and he was being confronted by protesters.
Okay, so the questions that we need to ask and what this actually means. I'm afraid, Stu and I were talking about it this morning, that in any other time in American history, this case would be thrown out now. They would file a charge. You got to throw this case out, and it would be done, and people would care. I'm not sure people care. I'm not sure people. I mean, that's where our justice system is. It only moves because somebody says something. The American people just won't take it. I wonder what the real fallout of this will be, and you probably have a good idea. Okay. What is next in this? And I know you talk to people in Congress, but is this going to move anything in D.C.?
I can tell you that not only working with Weaponization Committee investigators on this story, as well as the high-ranking staffers, and I can't get into specific on-the-record details, that there will be talks about hearings, and we know what hearings result in far too often. But there has to be something next, because, Glenn, this is literally an existential threat to our republic, what is taking place in our courts right now in D.C.
This is our government not getting it wrong.
No.
This is our government setting American citizens up, withholding evidence that's exculpatory, sentencing them to long sentences, and apparently several people are involved in this. This is as bad as it gets.
Even in one of the specific Oath Keepers cases during his sentencing hearing, this was the Oath Keeper Ken Harrelson, who you can see in video holding the crowd back from Officer Dunn. I mean, he's literally got his hands extended and he's holding them back as they were agitating and trying to get it done.
Right.
And there's 4 Oath Keepers lined up with their backs turned to Dunn. He's at the top of the stairwell holding an M4 rifle, and these guys are holding them back. And in his case, particularly, Judge Maida in his sentencing hearing actually said these words. He said, "Mr. Harrelson, I do not believe that you're the man that the government has made you out to be." Well, if I could speak to Maida right now, Judge Maida, I would tell him now we know that he is not the man who the government made him out to be, and you need to send him home.
Have you talked to their attorneys yet, the Oath Keepers'
I talk
attorneys?
to them every day.
And now that this is out and you're able to prove this, are they going to move?
They're in transition from their trial representation to their different legal teams that are going to be representing them in appeal. But these guys are
hot.
They're hot, and of course they all know how this was set up, and this is where the next part of this story is going. Is that look, we know that there was the equivalent of a star chamber set up and said, how are we going to get these guys? And we see the process and the pattern of events of how they led to that, as well as here, absolute proof of the creation and manipulation of testimony and of something that never happened and presented in that trial.
This story is a year's worth of a man's life. You must read it, by Steve Baker. Did Pelosi security chief perjure himself in the Oath Keepers trial? It is only part 1 of a series that Steve is working on, and you'll find it from Blaze Media at theblaze.com.